Hey guys, Comic Boom here to talk to you about the 4th, the 6th, and the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution in the context of superhero law, specifically Daredevil. There's a fantastic storyline, guys, going on right now that I think is more significant in the pages of Daredevil than Secret Empire itself. Matthew Murdock, who has finally got his secret identity back, thanks to the children of the Purple Man, Ebediah Kilgrave, is embarking on a secret plan, and his plan is actually quite ingenious. He's got a master plan of making it perfectly legal for superheroes to testify without having to reveal their secret identity. Now, you might think, well, what's the big deal? I mean, why don't superheroes testify in court all the time against the bad guys? Well, we probably just assume that they always did, because it's not really shown. Because let's face it, in comic books, we're just interested in the fisticuffs and the adventure and the fights and the action scenes. We don't really think what goes on behind the scenes, like what actually goes on in the courtroom. Well, interesting, writer Charles Soule for Daredevil, who is a U.S. immigration lawyer himself, as I understand it in real life, his particular take is to have Matthew Murdock become more of a hero in the courtroom and to utilize the courtroom in the Marvel Universe as a more effective weapon against the bad guys. And of course the supervillains, they don't like that, and they've got a pretty good lawyer by the name of Legal. That's literally his name. His name is Legal, who is a former lawyer of Tony Stark, who will be battling against Matthew Murdock in the courtroom. So what are we talking about? Matthew Murdock wants to utilize the 14th Amendment, which protects and states that everyone is entitled to due process of law. Matthew Murdock wants to have the court create another exception to the 6th Amendment. Now, the 6th Amendment preserves procedural due process, and it has basically 6 provisions. And these provisions exist even in the Marvel Universe. Every supervillain who gets arrested still has a right to a speedy and public trial, right to a jury trial in the same locale as they committed the crime in. A supervillain has the right to be informed of all charges against him or her, and the right to produce supporting evidence or witnesses. All supervillains are also entitled to a lawyer, and most importantly, for the purposes of Daredevil, for Matthew Murdock's secret plan, every supervillain is entitled under the 6th Amendment to a right to confront their accusers in court. And therein lies Matthew Murdock's secret plan. Because what Matthew Murdock wants to do, Matthew Murdock wants to be able to testify in court as Daredevil without having to reveal his secret identity. Because the 6th Amendment states that everyone who's charged, every supervillain who is charged with a crime has a right to confront their accuser. Well, you can't confront your accuser if your accuser is wearing a mask. So if any superhero that's wearing a mask, if they go on the stand, any competent defense counsel can easily attack the testimony by demanding that the witness remove their mask, because everybody has a right to face who their accuser is. If you're a social justice warrior and you're a vigilante and you're fighting for civil rights or anything and all that jazz, well then, hey, so what if you catch the bad guy? I got news for you, Miss Marvel. You can catch all the bad guys you want, but if you're going to testify against the bad guy in court, you're going to have to reveal to the world that you're Kamala Khan, whether you like it or not. Otherwise, your testimony will be struck, thrown out, and the prosecutor's going to have to find another way to put the evidence before the court, because your testimony doesn't mean anything. Now, Matthew Murdock knows that, and Matthew Murdock has had frustrations because Matthew Murdock needs to find just the right case to put before the court, because Matthew Murdock wants to be able to spy, use his radar sense to spy on villains like the Kingpin, and then be able to go into court as a private citizen and testify without having to reveal his secret identity, because he just got his secret identity back, and it's finally hidden from the world because he helped out Kilgrave's children, the Purple Man's children, and as a reward to him, they helped Daredevil by restoring his secret identity to the world. And Daredevil wants to make a difference. This is his big play to help all his fellow superheroes, so it makes it easier for them to testify in court. As a general principle, a private citizen can testify against somebody, and they're not restricted by the same types of restrictions as agents of the state are. For example, if a private citizen happens to overhear a conversation or find themselves in a situation where they're overhearing a conversation or even deliberately spy on someone's conversation. If they're a private citizen, they don't need a search warrant. They're not a cop. So it's only the government that has to get search warrants. See, the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution basically it creates laws against illegal search and seizure. Before the government can spy on you, they have to have reasonable and probable grounds to spy on you. So the problem is that, well, the government doesn't always have a lot of reasonable and probable grounds to spy on people, and that's why sometimes bad guys get off, because courts will throw out the evidence obtained by an illegal search. Well, what Matthew Murdock's trying to do is that he's trying to create a situation where superheroes, since they're private citizens, they're private social justice warriors, he wants to create a situation where they can spy on people and utilize their superpowers, and because they're private citizens, well, the state doesn't, the same rules and regulations don't apply to them. And so if a private citizen can do all this, if superheroes can utilize their powers and testify in court without having to reveal their identity, well, that's a huge score for the superhero community, and the bad guys are really going to be screwed. Now, the Kingpin knows this, and so the Kingpin hires the best legal mind that he can find. And boy, oh boy, does Matthew Murdock have his work cut out for him, because his competitor, his competition in court is a man by the name of Legal. He just goes by the name Legal. Not Mr. Legal, just Legal. I am legal, he says. And he's a former attorney who used to work for Tony Stark. And he's a genius, and he's very good. And he knows what's at stake. Now, you guys might be wondering, what's the big deal? What's the big deal if Daredevil testifies in court and he leaves his mask on? Why do courts require that people unmask? Why would they require superheroes to unmask if they don't want to? What's the big deal? Well, it's because everybody has a right to face their accuser. And, for example, when Spider-Man defeats the Green Goblin is unmasked. And he doesn't know that Spider-Man's Peter Parker. I don't recall a Spider-Man story where Spider-Man testified against Green Goblin. Maybe some of you guys can correct me, but for the most part, I mean, comic book writers aren't really that much up on the law, because it's kind of a boring thing they don't want to incorporate into comic books. But Charles Soule is a lawyer himself, so he knows the reality that the Green Goblin would be entitled to face who his accuser is. And so Spider-Man would have to take his mask off and reveal himself to be Peter Parker. And the reason why is you have to be able to judge the demeanor. The Green Goblin is entitled, through his lawyer, to cross-examine Spider-Man. So this idea, you know, the old Batman stories where Spider-Man is dropping bad guy off, tying him to the pole in front of the police precinct, that's all well and good. But the fact of the matter is that 99% of the time, those villains, they got off scot-free, because even a bad lawyer can get them off. Because, so what, even if you drop the bad guy off with the evidence on them, how did the evidence get there? Who dropped them off? How was it obtained? Where's the chain of evidence? As long as the villain remains silent, there's no evidence to present it. You're going to make it very difficult for a crown prosecutor or a prosecuting attorney to get a successful conviction. Well, Matthew Murdock's had enough. He says, you know what, enough of this. We superheroes should be allowed to testify on the stand without taking off our masks. This is ridiculous. Upon hearing this would create a precedent and an exception to the Sixth Amendment, the confrontation clause as they call it, and the Kingpin, upon hearing this, will have none of it. So the Kingpin puts a hit out on Matthew Murdock. Now, bear in mind that people in the Marvel Universe no longer know that Matthew Murdock is Daredevil. So the Kingpin does not know that Matthew Murdock is Daredevil, and he contracts Tombstone to try to take out Matthew Murdock. And he tries to take out Matthew Murdock while he's in a bar talking to Jennifer Walters, who is She-Hulk. And she's in that post-traumatic stress form of She-Hulk following her almost death in Civil War II. So she's not quite herself. But Jennifer Walters warns Matthew Murdock. She warns Matthew. She says, Matthew, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Now, why would Jennifer Walters warn Matthew Murdock about pursuing his agenda of getting that exception made to the confrontation clause of the Sixth Amendment? It's because, quite simple, guys, I'm going to play devil's advocate on it. It's a very bad idea. It's a slippery slope. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised that any true social justice warrior would agree to that. I'm not sure. I mean, you get all these, you get all these SJWs that are so big on civil rights. Do you really want to live in a world, if you're a citizen of the Marvel Universe, do you really want to live in a world where any superhero can testify against you and they don't even have to reveal their mask? For all you know, it could be anybody under the mask. If you don't have a right to face your accuser, then you're giving a lot of powers to superheroes. And right now in the Marvel Universe, we got Captain Marvel, who's the fastest. You got Captain America, who's a Hydra agent, and he's taken over America. You got heroes fighting heroes. Do you really want to give superheroes even more power? Look how corrupt S.H.I.E.L.D. is. Look how, who are the bad guys, who are the good guys? Bear in mind, what's the distinction of a superhero? And why should superheroes be given the distinction of being able to testify without having to reveal their identity? Why can't the rest of us decide to testify in a mask, with a mask on? Maybe I want to shield my face. Maybe I want to be able to testify without the person knowing my identity. What's the point of having a witness protection program if anybody can just wear a mask and testify? There are people that risk their lives testifying that aren't superheroes, and they're put in witness protection. Why are we given extra protection, extra rights to superheroes to be able to testify against bad guys in court, and they don't have to reveal their identity? There is another reason why I don't want Matthew Murdock to be successful. And I hope the legal character kicks his ass. It's because you might think that it's a good idea to let a masked vigilante testify against someone in court without revealing their identity. But what if you were the accused and you were innocent? And there's this superhero claiming that you did this or you did that, or that superhero. Imagine if it was Jean Grey on the stand insisting to the court that she read your mind. Or imagine that it was another telepath who was masked. Or what if it was Daredevil on the stand and he claimed that he used his radar sense to eavesdrop on you and he heard you planning a heist. And he's making it up. How could you test his credibility? How can you actually test his demeanor without him revealing the mask so you can be able to test? If you knew it was Matthew Murdock, maybe Matthew Murdock is compromised. You got to know something about the background of the witness. How do you know this guy's actually Daredevil to begin with, or actually Matt? And who exactly is this guy? I mean, these are basic rights of the law that you're entitled to. And if that's stripped from you, I mean, you might like it if the Green Goblin gets convicted or the Kingpin goes to jail. But what if you're charged with a minor offense and you did nothing? Whether it's a fender bender to a minor domestic assault. You're going to take the word of a superhero? Also, what constitutes a superhero? I decide I throw on a mask one night to run out and I claim I'm a superhero. How long do you have to be a superhero before you get the right to testify in court without having to remove your mask? This is a hodgepodge of chaos. And this is an accident waiting to happen. And Jennifer Walters warning to Matt about Matt, just because you might be successful. And by the way, Matthew Murdock has been successful at the appellate level in this story arc called Supreme. And this is likely going to go to the Supreme Court of the United States in the Marvel Universe. That's what's kind of cool about the story arc. Writer Charles Soule, he knows what he's doing. The ramifications of this story arc could be potentially huge. And I'm really curious to imagine what effect this storyline would have on the other social justice warriors in the Marvel Universe. What would Miss Marvel think? How would Miss Marvel feel if she had to remove her mask testifying in open court? She would probably love it if she didn't have to remove her mask. On the other hand, she's a social justice warrior, so maybe she would support the right, and maybe she would be against it, even if it meant that a couple of bad guys would get off because she would not be able to testify or she'd refuse to testify. There's a lot of open questions here, guys, a lot of very interesting questions. So this Daredevil arc, I really encourage people to pick it up. It's called Supreme, and it is Matthew Murdock's journey following the story arc that restored his secret identity, and he has lost the love of his life, Kirsten McDuffie. He has sacrificed her. He's given up her because when the purple children restored his secret identity, Kirsten forgot that Matthew Murdock was Daredevil, but she still loves Matthew Murdock. She just forgot that he was Daredevil. But because her life's always in danger, Matthew Murdock broke up with her because he felt it was the only way to protect her. And as a way of trying to obtain some type of forgiveness for himself and to redeem himself in his own eyes, because he went to confess his sins to a Catholic priest, and the Catholic priest told him, look, you've done nothing wrong, you haven't sinned. What you've done is that you've hurt yourself. It's you who can't forgive yourself. So if you insist on me giving you penance, tell me what it is that you want to do. And Daredevil told him, Matthew Murdock told him, I have a secret plan. I have a plan to do something with the law to get back and to redeem myself. And the priest said, well, then you do that. That will be your penance. Follow your plan and do the best that you can. And so that's why Matthew Murdock is doing this. And I think that Matthew Murdock is going to find out the hard way that this is a mistake. This is a big, big mistake, because where do you stop? If anybody in a mask can testify against another citizen, that's opening up a can of worms that I don't think we want to go there. It's nice to see a storyline where Matthew Murdock is exploring his legal acumen and utilizing the courtroom as a battleground in his fight against crime, because there's a lot of lessons to be learned in a courtroom. Whenever you win or you lose in court, you always learn something. There's always ramifications. And sometimes even when you win, you lose. And sometimes when you lose, you win. And Matthew Murdock, I think, is going to find that out, because he's playing with a grenade. Because for every exception you make to the Sixth Amendment, the confrontation clause, you open up more loopholes, and the outcome may not be as rosy as Matthew Murdock is hoping for. Hey guys, I just want to make a couple of more comments on the Fourth Amendment that deals with unreasonable search and seizure. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution deals with the rights against illegal search and seizure and the right to protect people against unlawful search and seizures by the government. And this goes all the way back to the Founding Fathers. So I would think that all the social justice warrior heroes in there in the Marvel Universe, they ought to be against Matthew Murdock on this one. Because really the Founding Fathers, one of the things that pissed off the Americans against the British was something called the writ of assistance, which during colonial times, the British would use this very general sort of search warrant that applied to everything. And they could search boats, search ships, search at every port and call. They could search pretty much whatever they wanted with no rhyme or reason, on virtually any kind of suspicion whatsoever. If you looked at them wrong, they could search your ship. It was a very much abused system. The Founding Fathers really wanted to put something in the Constitution that would protect a government from becoming too corrupt in searching and seizing items of property from their citizens. That's why a search warrant is absolutely necessary. The government can't just come in whenever they want on the basis of a suspicion. They got to have reasonable and probable grounds. The problem here is, if Matthew Murdock is successful in allowing a testimony of a superhero without revealing their secret identity in court, that compromises the defendant's ability to make a defense, and it also makes it possible, in theory, for Daredevil, as a private citizen who's not an agent of the state, he doesn't work for the government, he can spy on the Kingpin, he can use his radar sense, then he can go into court to testify, and no search warrants needed. Cops don't need search warrants. And so this makes it so, this would be like a windfall for the superheroes. Get all the telepaths, all the psychics, all the eavesdroppers, get the vision, all these people with superpowers so that you can spy on the bad guys. Go get all this information, go to court, wear a mask, testify. You'd be convicting bad guys left, right, and center. But what if you're the accused? What if you're the one who's been accused of doing something wrong? What if the superheroes are wrong? What if a telepath has a bad day? Or Daredevil, Matthew Murdock's radar sense is a little off one time, and he gets it wrong. And maybe you could have figured that out if you were able to cross-examine him, but you don't know that because he doesn't unmask, so you can't test his demeanor. You can't effectively cross-examine somebody if you don't know who they are. So you can see how Matthew Murdock's plan here is actually quite ingenious, but it's a pretty slippery slope. Now, it's important here at this point for me to mention what some of the exceptions are to the illegal search and seizure. For example, it is perfectly legal. A cop does not need a search warrant to search your vehicle. That's one of the exceptions, and the reasons for that are many and varied. Suffice to say that they can technically search your vehicle without a warrant in areas like impaired driving and other specific situations. And they can also, under a doctrine called the plain view doctrine, they don't need a search warrant. For example, if a police officer walks by your house and he sees through your front window that you're engaged in a criminal activity, he can plainly see you're engaged in criminal activity. It's in his plain sight. It's in plain view of anybody. So if it's in plain view, he doesn't need a warrant to enter your house. If he can see through your window that you've got cocaine on your table and you're snorting it up, he doesn't need a warrant to go into your house. If he sees you assaulting somebody, or he hears something going on, that would fall under exigent circumstances. So if he can hear screaming or something, hear somebody's life might be in danger, that's an exigent circumstance, so he can go in. So you got the plain view doctrine, you've got exigent circumstances, you've got motor vehicles as an exception, and also certain border patrols, customs officials have a right to search your vehicle without warrants as well. So, and also foreign intelligence officials, in this case in the Marvel Universe, S.H.I.E.L.D., for example, would probably have some, be able to search people's belongings and probably engage in certain searches without a warrant if they were designated as foreign intelligence officials, and they're allowed certain exceptions under the Fourth Amendment as well. But my point being is this: if you happen to have vision powers, you're a superhero, and you actually can see through walls, well, the plain view doctrine, that would be great, wouldn't it? I mean, technically, everything's in plain view to someone who can see through walls. So if I'm a cop and I have superpowers and I can see through a wall, everything's in plain view to me. Why do I need a warrant? I saw through the wall. It's within my plain view. I use that as an example here to show that when you throw superpowers into the mix, that throws a wrench into how you apply the law, because one of the most important principles of the 14th Amendment is equality before the law. Well, how do you have equality before the law? Exactly. When all the persons are different. When you got inhumans and you got mutants and you got ordinary citizens, what's ordinary for one person is not necessarily ordinary for another. What might be in plain view of one person who's got superpowers might not be in plain view of another person who's just an ordinary human being. Throws a wrench into things. Now that's what Matthew Murdock's looking at. And Matthew Murdock is opening up a can of worms. And that's just dealing with the Fourth Amendment. He's dealing with the Sixth. It's all under the purview of the 14th Amendment, which deals with due process of law. So look, guys, this is important. Nobody likes bad guys or supervillains. But if we're going to start messing with all these rights and due process and everything else under the guise of trying to put as many bad guys away, just remember, whenever you go closer to a crime control model, you move away from due process. And if you move away from due process, eventually you're the one that's going to get screwed. And I don't think we want that. Because when good Captain America comes back, I think he's going to be awfully pissed off at Matthew Murdock if Matthew Murdock is successful. So guys, check out Supreme, the Supreme storyline written by Charles Soule in Daredevil. This guy is hitting it out of the park. This is a really good series, guys. Trust me on this. Oh, actually, by the way, I'm cheering for the Kingpin on this one. Sorry. And quite frankly, if Matthew Murdock's successful, whether Matthew Murdock realizes it or not, what he wants is playing into the arms of Hydra in my mind. But that's just me. And for all you social justice warriors out there, you should not be in agreement with what Matthew Murdock's doing either. I'm talking to you, Kamala Khan. Anyways, guys, talk to you later.